For centuries, the Galactic Hegemony had ruled with an iron fist, its bureaucratic empire spanning countless star systems. Every decision was meticulously planned in cold, sterile chambers, signed off by faceless officials who had never known the weight of the lives they controlled. To the hegemony, every extermination was just another routine order, necessary, efficient, and above all, unquestionable. The galaxy bent to their will, their power absolute. No species had ever dared to defy them. Their fleets sailed across the stars like an unstoppable storm, and their advanced technology gave them dominion over entire civilizations. The hegemony had wiped out threats before with surgical precision, eliminating anyone who posed even the slightest risk to their reign. The galaxy had learned to fear them, to accept that resistance was futile, and for all their might, they believed that nothing would ever change. Until humanity came into view. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy with all the fanfare of a rising star. At first, they were an unknown, a chaotic, unpredictable species scattered across their own corner of the universe. They had no single leader, no unified empire, yet in their hearts burned an unmistakable ambition, a hunger for exploration, for dominance, for something more. They integrated quickly, but never assimilated. They were everywhere and nowhere, stubborn and independent, adapting to every situation with alarming speed. It took the hegemony by surprise. Humans were not like the others. They didn't follow orders, they didn't play by the rules. Soon, their influence spread across the stars. Their technology, though crude compared to the hegemony's, was fueled by ingenuity and relentless determination. And their rise was unsettling, unpredictable. The hegemony watched with growing unease. They were too quick to adapt, too free to control. Humanity was no longer just a curiosity. They were a potential threat. The decision to eradicate humanity was not made in the heat of battle or the chaos of war councils. No, it was much colder, more efficient. The paperwork was processed without emotion, just another stamp on another document. The hegemony had done this before. They always won. Humanity's unpredictable nature, their refusal to submit, was unacceptable. Their very existence was now considered a risk. No debate, no hesitation. Humanity had to be removed, systematically and thoroughly. There would be no warning, no negotiation, no mercy. The fleets were already on their way, countless ships in motion, their weapons primed, their engines burning through the stars. To the hegemony, it was a simple matter of eliminating a threat. After all, they had crushed species far more advanced than humans. Why would this be any different? The stamp came down, extinction order, humanity. The galaxy had seen the fall of civilizations before, but this time, it would be different. The hegemony believed the galaxy would be better off without them. It began with a request, a simple, innocent question. Humanity's diplomats, those bold, curious souls, began asking about old records, historical data, the hegemony's records, particularly those about species that had vanished without a trace. What happened to them? What had the hegemony done? The question itself was unremarkable. It had been asked by many others before, species seeking to understand their place in the galaxy. But humanity, with its insatiable curiosity, was different. They were not looking for answers, they were looking for secrets. The hegemony, secure in their superiority, dismissed it, a mistake. They assumed it was a passing curiosity, a fleeting distraction. No one had ever challenged them successfully before. Why should humanity be any different? But there was a gnawing feeling in the hegemony's ranks, an unsettling sense that something had changed. Humanity was asking the wrong questions, and the answers could very well be their undoing. Humanity had always been inquisitive, curious minds reaching into the unknown. But this time, there was something different about their pursuit. Quiet requests began flooding the hegemony's archives, seemingly innocuous queries about past extinctions, lost civilizations, and vanished species. Officially, they were framed as nothing more than routine access requests, cloaked in the legal formality of diplomacy. But something felt off. The hegemony, confident in their unchallenged control over the galaxy, barely took notice. To them, it was just another bit of curiosity from a species too young and too naive to understand the real complexities of the universe. The data was granted, and the inquiries continued, each one digging deeper into the secrets that the hegemony had carefully buried. They didn't notice the patterns forming, the subtle signs that humanity's investigation was anything but random. The archives contained records of extinction orders, the names of species wiped from existence by a callous, uncaring bureaucracy. Species erased with no reason other than they no longer served the hegemony's interests. For humanity, these weren't just historical documents, they were pieces of a puzzle, and the more they uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Humanity was not just investigating the past, they were preparing for something much bigger. Outwardly, humanity's efforts to fortify their colonies were brushed off as routine. Infrastructure upgrades, new defensive shields, enhanced planetary fortifications, and military outposts. The hegemony was convinced these were nothing more than measures for security as humanity continued its seemingly innocent expansion across the stars. But in truth, these upgrades were more than that. They were a deceptive war machine in the making, a vast silent network of defenses designed not just to protect, but to strike back. Humanity was preparing for war. Behind the sleek formal announcements and the engineered smiles of diplomats, workers constructed hidden bunkers, stockpiled weapons, and designed advanced combat systems that were far beyond what the hegemony had anticipated. The hegemony was too blinded by its arrogance to realize that humanity's quiet expansion wasn't just a desire to survive, it was a declaration of intent. Humanity was not there to assimilate. They weren't there to kneel before the hegemony's power, they were there to fight. But the hegemony saw no threat. Their overconfidence, their belief in their own superiority, had clouded their judgment. They dismissed it all as harmless. Humanity's fleets set out under the banner of peaceful exploration, their ships gliding through the stars like birds returning home. On the surface, everything appeared serene. Another expansion effort, another leap for humanity into the cosmic unknown. The fleets were equipped with advanced scientific instruments, ambassadors, and colonization teams. The hegemony barely glanced at the cargo manifest, but buried within the fleets was something far darker. Hidden warships, their weapons silent, their crews ready for battle. Humanity's strategy was simple: infiltrate the hegemony's blind spot. Exploration on the surface, war beneath. Each fleet was a carefully orchestrated deception. While the hegemony believed these fleets were no more than peaceful expeditions, they were in fact highly coordinated, well-armed units poised to strike. These ships carried with them not just diplomats, but soldiers, weapons, and intelligence operatives. They had come to explore, but not with the intention to learn. The hegemony made another miscalculation. They never saw the threat, never suspected that the human fleets, calm and methodical on the outside, were already preparing for something far more intense. A hidden war machine, slipping through the cracks of their complacency. And still, the hegemony didn't react. They didn't know they were already under siege. It began as a ripple, a minor anomaly. Just a flicker on the radar, unusual military patterns. Surveillance detected the movement of massive convoys, cargo ships, heavy transports, and military freighters, all converging at an alarming rate. The hegemony, in its arrogant belief that they had everything under control, dismissed it. It was just the usual troop movements, they said. Routine logistics, nothing to be concerned about. But the truth was different. These were not isolated incidents. These convoys were moving in synchrony, orchestrated with military precision. Humanity was mobilizing. At first, there was a sense of disbelief. The hegemony's intelligence gathered in fragments, each piece suggesting a much larger picture, yet none of it connected until it did. Humanity wasn't just preparing for a skirmish, they were preparing for a war, and it was already underway. The storm was gathering, and the hegemony was blind to it. They believed they had the upper hand. They always had. But this time, the pattern was clear. This time, the hegemony's grip was slipping. As the convoys neared their final destinations, the hegemony's confidence began to crack. Could they have been wrong? Could humanity have been planning something bigger than they realized? It was too late. The first wave had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The reports began trickling in like whispers through the cold, sterile corridors of the hegemony's vast bureaucracy. Human colonies were changing, seemingly without cause. At first, it was just a flicker on the radar, an upgrade here, a new defense system there, nothing major. But it wasn't just the installations, it was the shifting patterns. The infrastructure upgrades were no longer for civilian purposes. The hegemony's watchful eyes, trained on billions of systems, could not ignore the creeping realization. The humans were preparing for something. A low murmur filled the halls of power. Hegemony officials, those who had seen countless species rise and fall under their rule, were now questioning if they had miscalculated. The typical response was to dismiss it as just another human quirk, an obsession with security. But even the most arrogant bureaucrats felt the unsettling tension in the air. The question wasn't whether humanity was changing, it was what they were changing into. The galaxy's most powerful empire couldn't help but ask, what if humanity wasn't here to assimilate? What if their expansion wasn't just a mere desire to survive, but a deliberate challenge to the hegemony's authority? Humanity was clever, too clever. Their spy networks were far more effective than anyone realized. Reports from various sources, hidden in encrypted messages, intercepted communications, and anonymous informants, painted an unmistakable picture. Covert human mobilization. Ships moving in ways that didn't make sense. Fleet deployments, too coordinated, too synchronized. The hegemony's intelligence network initially brushed it off as mere coincidence. But the patterns didn't lie. They were too deliberate, too organized. The hegemony officials gathered in shadowed rooms, watching as the reports flooded in. They didn't want to believe it. Humanity was young, still struggling with its place in the galaxy. They were supposed to be a tool for assimilation, an ally to the powerful species that had mastered the stars. They had no reason to pose a threat, but the more they ignored it, the clearer the truth became. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Humanity wasn't just growing, they were preparing for war. An emergency meeting was called, and the hegemony's most senior officials gathered in the towering council chambers. Tension crackled in the air, the weight of impending conflict pressing down on every mind. Some of the most hardline voices called for swift extermination, suggesting that humanity's increasing militarization could only be met with one response: a complete eradication. Their reasoning was simple. Humanity had never faced a power like the hegemony, a show of force, and they would break. They always did, but others were not so sure. This time felt different. There was something in humanity's eyes, in their methods, that unsettled even the bravest members of the council. The humans were adapting faster than expected, outwitting their systems. Could it be? Were they learning too quickly? A few quieter voices spoke out, warning the council. Humanity is not like the others. They had an unpredictable spark, a drive to create, to survive against impossible odds. To them it felt less like a war, and more like a dangerous evolution. Exterminating them may be a fatal mistake. But the council was divided, and hesitation would only fuel the looming danger.
What makes us human? Philosophical. We're not the fastest, we're not the strongest, but we endure, and when it matters most, humanity changes everything.
The message arrived just as tensions reached their peak. A human envoy, young, dressed in the sharp uniform of an ambassador, yet carrying the weight of something far heavier, stood before the council. His words, delivered in calm, measured tones, sent a chill through the room. "We are not like the others." He said it not with anger, but with certainty. He paused, meeting the eyes of each council member in turn. His eyes were the eyes of a species that had seen war, suffered loss, and yet survived. "Others have fallen easily before you," he continued, "but we are not them." His message was clear. Humanity would not bend. They would not submit to extermination or subjugation. They would resist, they would fight, and they would win. The diplomat's warning was sharp, like a blade held just out of reach. The council knew it was only a matter of time before humanity's fury would be unleashed, but they didn't know how, and that uncertainty was their greatest fear. The hegemony could no longer wait. The fleet, a symbol of their unquestionable dominance, was dispatched to quell the human problem. The warships cut through the stars with the precision and power only the hegemony could muster. To the Empire, it was just another mission, another reminder to the galaxy of their power, but there was something different this time. The arrogance that had once been a shield now served as their blindness. They expected the humans to kneel, to surrender at the first show of overwhelming force. They expected humanity to bend to the weight of their oppression, just like every other species before them. What they didn't expect was resistance. Humanity was not the weak, divided race they assumed. The ships were waiting, human fleets, born of necessity, honed through countless battles, some already in position, hidden among the stars. A resistance unlike any the hegemony had ever faced. When the hegemony's fleet arrived, it wasn't greeted with submission. It was met with counterattacks. Weapons, hidden in plain sight, blazed to life, and the hegemony's arrogance shattered like glass. The galaxy had never seen anything like this. Humanity was no longer the victim. They were the challenger, and the hegemony had underestimated them, just as they always had. The vast void of space was silent, eerily silent, as the hegemony's fleet, a vast armada of warships, cut through the stars toward humanity's outpost systems. Their mission was simple: crush the humans. The hegemony had made the mistake of thinking that humanity's resistance was nothing more than a blip, a fleeting nuisance. The strategy was clear: overwhelm them with sheer force, and crush any sign of rebellion before it spread. What they didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment. Hidden defenses, dormant for years, now flared to life. The silent hum of energy shields reverberated through the deep silence of space. Traps set long ago snapped shut. The hegemony's ships, brimming with arrogance, flew straight into the heart of a well-laid ambush. Massive swarms of human drones, small, quick, and armed with deadly precision, swarmed the larger warships like predators on the hunt. Explosions ripped through the hegemony's lead vessels, caught completely off guard. In the command center of the flagship, panic spread like wildfire. Admirals, once confident in their superiority, were now screaming orders into the chaos. Ships were being pulled from hyperspace, ensnared by unexpected traps. The tactics used were like nothing the hegemony had seen before. Humanity had planned for this moment, and it was a trap that the Empire had walked into willingly. For centuries, humanity had lived under the shadow of extinction. It was a fate that had haunted their past, etched into their bones. Entire civilizations, alien and human alike, had tried to wipe them out. The galaxy's greatest powers had believed they could snuff out humanity like a candle's flame, but they never succeeded. Why? Because humans never stopped adapting. Now humanity had turned the lessons of past genocides into their greatest strength. Each extinction attempt had been analyzed, studied, and countered. Every weapon, every trap, Every strategy used against them was now part of their arsenal. Human engineers had reverse-engineered hegemony technology, improvised new tactics, and crafted countermeasures so effective that the hegemony's standard extermination protocols were useless. The energy shields the hegemony relied on, overcome with targeted pulses. The automated war droids they sent to destroy human settlements, reprogrammed to serve humanity's defense. Humanity had learned to turn every weakness into a weapon. The tables had turned. Where the hegemony had once seen a species to annihilate, they now faced an opponent whose resilience and intellect had been honed by survival itself. The hegemony was being forced to reckon with a truth they had long ignored. Humans were never the underdogs. They were the last standing against all odds. The hegemony's fleet was vast, its warships massive and bristling with weaponry, designed to crush any foe. They thought the human fleets would crumble before their might. They were wrong. As the first shots rang out across the cold expanse of space, the hegemony's warships quickly discovered that the human tactics defied every expectation. Humanity's battle strategy wasn't just about fighting back. It was about outsmarting, outmaneuvering, and using guerrilla warfare in space. The human ships were smaller, faster, and more agile. They didn't engage in head-on battles. Instead, they used the terrain of asteroids, moons, and debris fields to their advantage. They struck fast, like shadows in the void, launching surprise attacks and retreating before the hegemony's fleet could retaliate. The hegemony warships struggled to keep up. They had been built for dominance, for overwhelming force, but they were not built to adapt, and that was where humanity had the edge. When the first major battle ended, the hegemony had lost several ships, a huge shock to their system. It was the first major defeat the hegemony had suffered in centuries. The humans had won the battle, not by strength alone, but by tactics, by outthinking and outlasting the hegemony's brute force. And the hegemony, they were reeling, trying to process what had just happened. While the hegemony's fleet tried to regroup and retaliate, they were met with an unexpected enemy, their own bureaucracy. Back at the heart of the hegemony's military command, orders were delayed. The calls for swift eradication of humanity were tangled in layers of red tape, paperwork, legal loopholes, and endless regulations. The systems that once made the hegemony powerful now turned against them, slowing down their response time. The higher echelons of the hegemony had underestimated how long it would take to mobilize their full force. The humans had already begun using this delay to their advantage. It wasn't just military tactics they were employing. Humanity's ability to adapt quickly was now a weapon of its own. The delays were fatal. The longer the hegemony hesitated, the stronger humanity grew. Every passing hour gave the humans more time to regroup, to counteract. Every minute wasted in bureaucratic delays pushed the hegemony closer to defeat. Their arrogance had blinded them to one key truth: a machine that doesn't adapt is bound to break. Then came the unveiling. The humans had played their cards close to their chest. They had studied the hegemony's technology, reverse-engineered their ships, and improved on everything the hegemony thought they had mastered. The human war fleet was revealed in full force, and the hegemony leaders realized too late that they had underestimated their foe. The ships humanity had built were faster, deadlier, and more efficient than anything the hegemony had ever seen. Human ingenuity had surpassed them at their own game. The hegemony's arrogance had been their downfall. They had been caught in a trap of their own making, and now, facing a fleet far beyond their expectations, they had no choice but to watch as their empire began to crumble. Humanity's trump card had been played, and the hegemony was outmatched.
They said Earth was small, but when we spoke, the galaxy listened. And now you're here, not late, but right on time. This channel's been waiting for people like you, so don't hold back. Subscribe. This journey belongs to you now.
The once invincible hegemony fleet limped through the cosmos, its proud ships battered and scarred from the battle they never expected to lose. The stars, cold and uncaring, stretched out before them, silent witnesses to the unraveling of an empire. For the first time in history, a species had defied extinction, and it was humanity. The hegemony had been arrogant. They believed themselves unstoppable. They had conquered countless worlds, crushed civilizations beneath their heel, and wiped out all who dared to resist. But humanity had proven them wrong. Now, in the wake of the battle, their once mighty fleets lay shattered in the blackness. Ships that had been symbols of their power burned husks, drifting aimlessly like broken dreams. The human guerrilla tactics had torn through them, swift and brutal. The hegemony's pride was now a memory, and their fleet was in retreat, fleeing the very species they had underestimated. On their flagship, the admiral's face twisted in disbelief. Their forces, the pride of the galaxy, had been humbled. The humiliation was unbearable, but there was no time for sorrow or rage. The fleet's survival depended on fleeing, and quickly humanity had won, and the hegemony was forced to retreat, humiliated, broken, and for the first time, vulnerable. As the hegemony limped away, their defeat didn't just resonate with them, it sent ripples through the galaxy. Alien civilizations, once too afraid to challenge the mighty empire, began to take notice. The impossible had happened. The hegemony had fallen, and it wasn't at the hands of another superior power. It was the humans who had done it. Across the stars, whispers spread like wildfire. Rebellions that had once seemed hopeless began to stir. Humanity's victory had shaken the foundations of galactic power. The universe had always viewed humanity as a weak species, one to be crushed underfoot. But now, that perception was shattered. The galactic balance had tilted. No longer were the hegemony's fleets the uncontested rulers of space. No longer could alien species look at them with fear. The age of humanity's oppression was over. Their rise marked the beginning of a new era, one where humanity was no longer a footnote, but a force to be reckoned with. The hegemony, broken and retreating, faced a choice that no one could have predicted. Their once unquestioned power was gone, and now they stood at a crossroads. Humanity could have demanded vengeance, could have crushed the empire under its boot, but humanity chose something else, a path forward. No demands for retribution, no cries for revenge. Instead, a single offer echoed across the stars, delivered with cold precision. Humanity would give the hegemony a choice: adapt or be left behind. The humans weren't interested in eliminating the hegemony. They wanted to forge something new. The hegemony, still licking its wounds, was forced to confront its own crisis of identity. They could submit, cooperate with the humans, and join the new order, or they could fade away into the annals of history, a forgotten empire that was once mighty, but now irrelevant. Humanity's offer wasn't an ultimatum, it was an invitation to change. Humanity didn't just rise to power through military might. They knew the strength of diplomacy. The galaxy was a web of old grudges and ancient conflicts, but humanity understood that the only way forward was to build something new, something united. Human diplomats stepped onto the stage, their presence a symbol of this new era. Old enemies, species that had fought bitter wars for centuries, now found themselves forced to negotiate. Diplomacy was no longer just about borders and territories. It was about creating a galactic balance that no longer depended on the oppression of the weak. The hegemony, now weakened, was forced to the table. They had no choice but to cooperate. The humans, for the first time, were the ones holding the power, not through force, but through the strength of new ideas. The galaxy watched, stunned, as enemies became allies, bound not by trust, but by necessity and humanity. They had ensured that no species would suffer again the way they had. The war was over, the hegemony had retreated, and the galaxy had shifted. Humanity was no longer the underdog, the oppressed. They were stepping into a new role as a galactic power, one that could lead, not by fear, but by creativity, diplomacy, and the strength of unity. As humanity embraced this new future, a final transmission crackled through the void. A voice, calm and resolute, echoed across the stars. It was a message from Earth, from the very heart of humanity's home. We are here to stay. The words reverberated in the minds of every species across the galaxy. It was not a threat, it was a declaration. The age of oppression was over. The galaxy would never be the same again. The future had begun, and humanity was no longer just surviving, they were thriving. Humanity's defiance echoed across the galaxy, shattering the old order. The hegemony, once the rulers of the stars, watched in silence as their grip on power loosened, unraveling before their eyes. The battle was over, and the victors were not the towering empires of old, but a species they had written off as weak. Humanity's refusal to bow had sparked a wave of change. Across the galaxy, new laws began to take shape, sweeping through every star system. No species would face extinction again, not while the human voice was at the table. These laws weren't born of violence or revenge, but of a shared desire for survival, an understanding that the galaxy could no longer be ruled by fear alone. The Galactic Council reformed, now with humanity as a key player. Diplomacy and unity replaced old grudges and endless war. The old ways were dead. The new era had begun. The hegemony still stood, but their power was no longer absolute. The stars had begun to shift, and a coalition of independent species now stood in opposition, refusing to bow to the once mighty empire. The galaxy was divided, but this time, the division was not for war. Instead, it was for peace, a fragile peace, held together by the thin threads of new alliances. Tension lingered in the cold of space, and though the battles had stopped, the war was far from over. A quiet, uneasy truce hummed in the background, one where every faction watched the others with suspicion and hope. Could they trust each other, or was this peace simply the calm before another storm? Only time would tell. Humanity's rise was not defined by conquest, but by the quiet strength of wisdom. The wars were behind them. The universe was now their canvas. Alliances were forged, not through coercion, but through the quiet exchange of ideas and technologies. Humanity shared what they could, but always with caution, knowing that the future depended on restraint and wisdom. Where once they had fought to survive, now they were helping others to do the same. Species that once feared humanity now sought their counsel, eager to learn from a species that had somehow overcome extinction. The galaxy was beginning to adapt, to evolve with humanity at its center. The ripple effects of their victory were more powerful than any fleet. Humanity's intelligence and adaptability were their true weapons. Beyond the prying eyes of the galaxy, deep in the void, humanity's next step was already in motion. Inside a secret facility, buried far from any known star system, the murmurs of a select few echoed in the silence. They had won the battle. Now came the hard part, shaping the future. The room was dim, filled with maps of star systems, blueprints of advanced technologies, and screens that flickered with secret data. Phase 2 was humanity's next play, a project designed to ensure their place at the top of the galactic order. No longer would they be the ones fighting for survival. Now they were the architects of destiny, and the galaxy would never see them coming. The final word on humanity's legacy would not be written in the ashes of war, but in the ink of a new reality. As history was rewritten, one phrase became etched into the collective consciousness of the universe. They wanted us to follow their rules. We rewrote them instead. Humanity had not just survived, they had reshaped the stars themselves. The galaxy, for all its ancient history, was now humanity's stage. The rules had changed. The future was theirs to write, and in that moment, the universe knew humanity would never be forgotten.
They came, but they never understood us. In our silence, there was thunder. In our eyes, war. This story isn't theirs, it's yours. This channel is yours. If you feel it, hit subscribe. Don't walk this path alone.